Hi guys, Miss Shuit here. This week we're going to be focusing on the rhetorical devices and specifically those counter arguments, those rhetorical devices that you can use in your research writing project. So our learning target is to be able to apply those rhetorical devices, such as counter arguments, to research writing projects. So by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to understand rhetorical appeals, ethos, pathos, logos, and you'll be able to understand why and how to use counter arguments in your research essay. You'll also be able to use an introductory phrase for counter arguments, cite specific authors in your counter arguments, and then also return to the original argument thesis, including your when you're including your counter argument. What is rhetoric? The art of effective or persuasive speech or writing. And it is a writer's use of a language, techniques, devices, strategies to really move an audience to adapt a belief, accept a soundness of a position, or follow a course of action. And rhetoric originally began in Greece, and Aristotle used those three basic appeals, and those are known as the classical appeals. And now we're going to go ahead and go into those. Ethos, pathos, and logos. So the first one is ethos, which is an ethical or moral argument. Think of ethos, ethical. Pathos is an emotional argument. It's appealing to your emotions, your fear of things, your compassion towards certain things, your patriotism. And logos is a logical argument, is using reason and using that evidence. I want to get a little bit more specific into ethos, which is an appeal to ethics. Trustworthiness of the speaker, writer. That's what that really means. When you're appealing to ethics, you're making yourself an trustworthy speaker. So because we're more willing to listen to what she or he has to say when we believe that they are trustworthy. So for example, when a doctor gives you advice, you may not understand all of the medical reasoning behind their advice, but you really follow it because you believe that a doctor knows what they're talking about. They've gone to medical school, they're an authority. So that's really appealing again to that ethical, to that authority. So if the same doctor, though, couldn't really pronounce those medical words, or they seemed unsure of their statements, or they would forget what they said, you'd probably question their authority as an expert on medicine. So pathos. Here's some examples of pathos. So pathos, again, it's using an emotional appeal. This one's a pretty common one, and you probably see it in commercials, or you'd see it in campaign ads, anything. It is a play with your basic emotions: fear, love, patriotism, guilt, hate, or joy. And it really moves you to action. So if you fear something, let me give you an example of something that you might hear on the radio or you might hear on the TV. Act now, limited time offer only. We must take this action if we want to be safe, or we can't afford to not do this. Logos, and that means logic. And it's an attempt to appeal to your intellect. Left side of the brain. And it's an audience that relies on reasoning and facts to make its decision. So that's really where logos or logic is going to be your evidence, your citations, your in-text citations, your resources. It's really going to appeal to your reader's intellect. Again, those are going to be those statistics, numbers, poll statistics, all of those that you're going to cite. And it needs to be a balance of all three. The Aristotle's rhetorical triangle, it's really about using a balance of all three. And you really want to be asking yourself, what are the facts or evidence that I can use to support for my argument? And, when you're looking for sources too, you're going to be asking yourself if the speaker is reliable or credible. Are they appealing too much to pathos? Are you feeling emotionally manipulated? Like they're taking you for a drive. Is the speaker truly knowledgeable or an expert on the subject? So, I wouldn't go to somebody who, you wouldn't just go to anybody for medical advice. You wouldn't just ask somebody to, even if somebody had really good intentions, you want to make sure that they are truly an expert and that they're knowledgeable on that. For example, if I performed open heart surgery, I'm a teacher and that's not my qualification, that's not my background. But if I just told you and you're about to have open heart surgery and I just said, oh, well, I have the best of intentions and I really care about my patients, you might still run away because, again, you're kind of feeling a little bit, you're not feeling that I'm a trustworthy person and that I'm an expert in this particular field. So that's why we really need evidence to support that authority. And that can be used by those examples or case studies and that specific research, and that those are all things that we can use in our essay to make a point. And then also those are things that you can disprove in your counter arguments. Legitimate source, I want to get into this a little bit. Using legitimate sources, citing somebody like, it's nice to have the opinion of others or peers, but you wouldn't really cite them as a legitimate source. So, for example, my mom said this and that wouldn't necessarily be a legitimate source. You wouldn't necessarily cite mom. So legitimate sources usually come from an academic institution, university, a college, and the good rule is to have those websites end with .org, .net, .gov, .edu. Those are usually typically legitimate websites. And of course, well-known journals, newspapers, the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, East Valley Tribune, those are just some examples. Questions that you should really ask yourself when you're finding these sources. Who's sponsoring the website? What evidence do they provide in their statements? And what type of data are they presenting and where did they get it? Are they citing those sources? Because they should if they're legitimate too. And how much of what is being stated is fact and how much of it is just opinion. Again, when you are writing an academic essay, you sort of become invisible. You are making a claim, but you are making it in a formal academic point of view. So you are sort of invisible, but you're still sort of there providing all the facts with the commentary and things like that. So you're using commentary, but you're not really using personal pronouns like I believe. Okay, let's go ahead and get into writing counter arguments. Because if you are making a claim in your thesis, you would have a topic and then you'd have a claim and then those three supporting details. In that counter argument, you are making it, the counter argument would be a position that is the opposite of your thesis, the opposing viewpoint. And it really expresses the viewpoint that maybe you don't necessarily agree with in your paper, but it is still necessary. So why would we use them? What's the purpose of a counter argument in your paper? I often get the question, wouldn't that weaken your argument? Why would you even want to tell them what the other... Actually, it does not. Done well, it actually makes your argument stronger because it gives you the chance to respond to your readers' objections before they have finished reading. It also shows that you're a responsible person who's considered both sides of the debate. Again, you are the expert. Think of a lawyer in a court room. He would also acknowledge the other side, but present a counter argument to that. And he would present the argument that is stronger, or he would find some kind of fallacy in that argument. Although this and this was presented by the witness, this evidence shows the contrary, and then they would present those facts. How should a counter-argument be structured? So a counter-argument should be expressed thoroughly and fairly. A few sentences is not really enough, so a paragraph wouldn't necessarily be unreasonable because you really want to show your reader that that you've thought about it, that you put yourself in their position. So once you do that, you really are giving them the benefit of the doubt, and they're more likely to be persuaded. You're going to avoid biased language because, again, you're making a statement. In your research paper, you are researching and making a certain claim, and a lot of times you are going to be passionate about the subject, but it will be, and so it will be really difficult to be completely objective in your counter arguments, but it's really important to try. So it's important to be respectful and give the other side, again, the benefit of doubt, even if you view their side as incorrect. So even if you really disagree, you still have to give them the benefit of doubt and acknowledge it, because again, it's going to make your argument even stronger. And when you're giving that other side the benefit of the doubt, you're really analyzing their logic in a counter argument to show that it is faulty. So again, when you're the organization of your research paper, you will present a counter argument. However, you will not present more counter arguments than your own claim or supporting details. You're just acknowledging the other side. And the way to show that those are faulty is by either looking, really analyzing their logic, looking at those facts. Are the facts wrong? Is the analysis incorrect? Are the values based on something? Are they really acceptable? And then sometimes a counter argument is really simply irrelevant because it's really not responding to the correct argument. It's making a faulty argument. There's some clear signals that indicate to the reader that your paper is about to introduce a different point of view, because again, you want to separate the claim that you make from acknowledging the other side and making that counter argument. Since the purpose of the whole paper, including the counter argument, is to support the thesis, those signals are crucial. And without them, your paper appears incoherent and contradictory. The counter-argument will begin with a word, phrase, or a sentence that indicates that what follows is not the author's point of view. So that's not going to be your point of view. So you need to be really specific that you're switching gears and that you're using those transition words effectively. Examples of those introductory strategies are, here's some sentence frames for you. Many people believe, argue, think, suppose that, and then you would state your counter argument there. It is often imagined, thought, supposed that. It may seem, appear, look, as if. And then you can also introduce it in the form of a question. Isn't it true that many people might believe that animal testing is cruel? Doesn't it, wouldn't it, isn't it is another way that you can introduce that. citing specific writers or thinkers who are expressing the opposing viewpoint. On the other hand, and then you would cite the author, on the other hand, Dr. Smith argues that, however, Dr. Green has written this and that about the animal cruelty. A few ways to use a rebuttal to return to the original thesis is what this argument overlooks, fails to considers, does not take into account is. So you can say what this argument overlooks, fails to considers, does not take into account is that animal testing is required for the advances of medical practices. This view seems, looks, sounds convincing at first, but we don't have all the facts, or this data was taken inaccurately. Another one is, while this position is popular, it is not supported by the facts or logical and impractical, and then you would state the reason why. Although the core of this claim is valid, it suffers from a flaw in its reasoning, application, etc. Okay, and it is very essential that you actually return to your original argument because you don't want to confuse the reader. So, for example, in Project 5, you're going to be researching a legend. So one of your arguments could be, as seen on Stranger Things, the existence of parallel universes is a real phenomenon. And this information can be built on when necessary, and a rebuttal to the argument could read something like this. However, the interpretation on the series Stranger Things is based on mistaken terminology. According to physicist and Professor Brian Greene, it is possible to have many universes in which you will also have an extra dimension of space. And then there is a citation right there. It is written by Mueller, and there's a work cited for you. Again, that rebuttal acts to ease back to the thesis. So in that second part, I talk about the thesis again, and I'm providing proof. So again, it's very important that you provide proof. All right, and then here is your exit ticket for this week. I'll give you some time. You might want to open up your browser and type in that exit ticket. I will also be sending that to you via announcements. I'll be posting an announcements, and I'll also be sending it by email and personal message. So thank you so much for joining me this week, and I hope that you have a great week, and I will see you next week.